Who's that coming down the track?
Who's that coming down the track?
It's a mean machine in red and black.
Mean machine in red and black.
Ain't nothing finer in the land.
Ain't nothing finer in the land.
Them drunk, obnoxious Georgia man.
Red rock, obnoxious Georgia man.
Go, go! Go, go!
What's going on, y'all? This is John, and I have Caleb with me for this episode of the Nothing Finer podcast. And as we do for the last episode of every week, we're talking about the best week 2 games across college football. But I do want to say for the next little bit, Caleb will be with me because Mike's gotten way too busy with coaching, grad school, and, all the kids and the family and all that kind of stuff. And contrary to popular belief, he is not Superman. I was kind of shocked when I figured that out.
Yeah, me too. I could have sworn I seen him putting some glasses on and putting on a red cape, but
I mean, he
even
does,
Superman can't do everything.
he is a journalist. He does write some, so the parallels were there. I will say hairline was a little bit lacking to be Clark Kent, but I was gonna give him the pass.
Yeah, and his replacement isn't doing much better in that department either.
I will say I was very blessed. They say that you get your hairline from your mom's dad, and my grandfather died at 85 with a full head of hair. It may have been white, but it was all there.
See, I was heartbroken when I got that news because I always dreamed of being a silver fox one day. And my grandfather on my mother's side, my grandfather on my father's side was that, and my grandfather on my mother's side was bald by 40. So, and I'm definitely on the way there, but I've learned to embrace it.
And they say that, I don't know where I was going with that. I lost my train of thought immediately. I do have a gray patch in my beard that travels. It's like this. It's like the brotherhood of the traveling grays in my beard, if you will. But lately it's been down on my neck where I normally trim it anyway. So I, might be partially colorblind, but according to my eyes, I don't even have any gray hairs yet. So
yeah, I was gonna say I don't notice it right now. And I'm looking at your beautiful face quite closely.
It's normally right here.
Gotcha.
I did, for the watch party last week, I did get trimmed up all over. So I don't, Kelsey's biggest complaint is that if I don't get my beard trimmed more than anything, but if I don't get my beard trimmed every, 2 weeks to a month, she claims that I look homeless. And I tell her the Army spent years training me to be homeless, and that's not a good enough answer for her. So I got to get it trimmed to keep her happy. And luckily, one of my friend's wives on Tybee cuts hair professionally. So
oh, nice.
So I got the hookup, and I got the walk in, talk to my buddy, and he hands me a beer while I'm getting my hair cut.
That's the dream. That is absolutely the dream.
If you would have asked me 5 years ago if I thought I'd be living the dream, living 15 minutes from the beach, I would have said hell no. And to be fair, I didn't think the dream would be this poor. But I do have, a ton of friends and get to do whatever I want 5 days a week. So it could be worse.
There we go. Yeah. Some things are more valuable than money, which is good because there's not a whole lot of money to go around these days.
But before we get into the games, how you been? It's been a hot minute since you've been on here and talked to us.
Yeah, no kidding. I think we were talking conference realignment like a hypothetical last time I was here. But I've been good in terms of recent. In middle school, admittedly, I was the emo kid, which means I developed a fondness for the band Linkin Park. And so they just put out they just did a live stream announcement / mini concert today, unveiling their new lead singer and a new album that they're going to be putting out. New single, just the works. And wasn't sure how I would feel about it, and I'm gonna get canceled for this, but especially when I saw a female singer, just because I like female voices traditionally to sound more feminine when they're singing, and I didn't know how it would blend in, but she killed it and has
Does it
killed
sound
it in the
close to
single.
Chester?
So it's hard to say. You got the passion and energy of Chester, but it wasn't, it's not like she was mimicking the voice or anything like that. And
Okay.
I don't think that would have been the move to begin with. You can't replace a guy like that.
It's very
Um,
difficult to find a guy like Journey did.
yeah, that's a great comp because I don't know the guy's name for Journey who took Steve Perry's place, but he
I, I don't either.
absolutely, but he's one for one spot on vocally. So this isn't a case like that, but she's solid. She's got a good. You could tell she's got a heart for the music that they made, and she sings it well with the kind of right kind of passion. But it's not like she's slotting in and just replacing a legend like Chester in that way. So I think it's a good fit. So sorry to go off on a tangent about Linkin Park, but that's what's been on my mind for the last
No,
couple hours.
I'm excited. I have been, I also was an emo kid back in the day, and I'm sure you can't tell by the currently long
Piercings
hair
and
and nose
tattoos.
ring and tattoos. But you still, when I go work out, it is 100% an early and mid 2000s emo playlist
Yes.
because I'll even there's one song in particular that I cannot remember the name of to save my life right now. But if I ever lift heavy now, it is this playlist 10 times out of 10. Oh, A Day to Remember the Downfall of Us All. Like
Oh yeah.
if I am going to like lift heavy max out, that's just on repeat as loud as I can get it in my headphones. And I'm
Start the rep on the
trying,
let's go at the beginning.
yeah, like I am trying to hurt some joints.
Yes.
I don't do that as often anymore, since I had a shoulder surgery and all that, but it's still one of those like that the TikTok/reel that's gone viral. Like, what's a song that makes you want to drink as soon as you hear it? That's the song that just makes me want to lift heavy shit as soon as I hear it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't lift a whole lot, but when I hear that song, I want to run through a brick wall or something. Act like I'm stronger than I am.
Speaking of acting like you're stronger than you are, let's talk about this Michigan game.
Yeah.
Texas at Michigan. Texas currently 7.5-point favorites, over under 42.5. And these were the lines as of 24 hours ago. And I don't know what they currently are. I've been busy as hell since 6:30 this morning. But for Michigan, after the offensive showing that we saw from them in week one, this game does not seem like it's going to be much of a task for Texas. Last week, the Texas defense held Colorado State to 192 total yards. And some of y'all may be saying, like, oh, it was just Colorado State. In 2023, Colorado State put up 397.8 yards per game. It's also known as pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
With most of the same guys being on that offense that played last week, quarterback, running back, top two wide receivers all came back for 2024. And then last week, Michigan played two quarterbacks who went for a total of 16 to 27 for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns with 1 interception. And those same two quarterbacks combined for 6 carries and 23 yards.
Womp womp, as they say.
Right. So two quarterbacks had 33 attempts to move the ball, right? 33 attempts, 100 and not a mathologist here, but that looks a lot like 141 yards on 33 attempts. It's not real good.
No, what is that? Little over 3 yards per attempt,
which would have been phenomenal back in 1980.
Yeah.
In 2024, that is a disappointing season. And with the news that came out today about Michigan's entire coaching staff not having contracts for the 2024 season, could be tough.
I was going to bring that up because, like, if that doesn't just scream, we're just holding these guys in place so somebody can take the fall if this Stallion stuff blows up even more, I don't know what does. And, I kind of feel bad for Sherron Moore because he seems like a genuine guy who's excited about the Michigan program and wants to lead it somewhere. At least that's how he comes across. I don't know. He could be as fake as the rest of them. But, I just feel kind of bad that he's going to end up being the fall guy for this if this goes anywhere else.
Yeah, I hate it for him, and especially after, what, he coached 6 games last season, and for a team that won a national championship, he coached 6 games. Did they cheat leading up to the season? Yes, but this all came out before the season. So during the season, once everybody changed their signals, they couldn't cheat, right?
Yeah. Certainly once it really started hitting the headlines, they couldn't just keep going with it.
Exactly. This is a guy that legitimately cried after coaching the team to Penn State and Ohio State wins.
Yeah.
Like he's either he needs an Oscar or he truly cares about this team and is in the process of getting shafted.
Yeah. Considering he coaches college football for a living, I'm going to say the latter is a lot more likely than the former. But you never know. Steve Spurrier was an entertaining guy too, and he was kind of a snake.
Fair. But a little bit back to the game. Michigan is a team built almost entirely around their offensive line. Had a total of 148 yards rushing and allowed 1 sack and 4 tackles for loss against a Mountain West school in Fresno State. It took an 86-yard pick six for Michigan to beat Fresno by 20 when they were favored by almost 40 points. And this entire every piece of information I gave you is about Michigan there, because to me they're the only team with questions leading into this game. So, man, I got Texas big. I got them. I got Texas covering. I've got them. Like, I would be shocked with less than a 2-possession win.
Yeah, when you look at these two teams, the Michigan's coming into this season because they're the defending national champions. They're coming into the season, I think we can agree, pretty heavily overrated. Jumping them into the top 10. I get doing it because they were coming off a championship, and maybe they are better than all the teams they're ranked ahead of, but they're not the cream of the crop team that you sort of saw from them last year. And I don't think they're anywhere near Texas's level. Texas has better coaches, better players. I picked them in the helmet prediction to win this game. I picked them this morning to win this game. But I'm going to give you a little however. I got to thinking about it. Sherron Moore, one thing he's got going for him, he is, technically speaking, a first-year head coach for this Michigan team. And normally, you look at that, you see a big team like Texas coming in and you think that's a knock against him. But from the fact that, as I've been texting in stats and trends and stuff for the last couple of years as you've done this podcast, I'm a big believer in trends. And, I got to thinking about first-year coaches and these kinds of big games. I think about, Billy Napier against Utah. I think about Lincoln Riley against Ohio State, Dion against TCU, Kirby against North Carolina. And, these games tend to go the way of the first-year coach if we completely ignore Dan Lanning against Georgia and don't talk about that. Generally speaking, Texas hitting Georgia, hopefully I don't end up eating my words on that particular phrase later in the season. But, I get a feeling Michigan could win this game. I think if I'm betting on the game, I still pick Texas to win and probably cover because the facts are telling me that. But, I don't know. I just get a feeling Michigan's going to win this football game. Call me crazy. It's at Michigan, first-year
right,
head
crazy.
coach. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
No, I understand everything you're saying. I cannot see how they do it.
Yeah, that's sort of been the drawback, and that's I've been back and forth. I don't know if you have seen my edits and my notes that I've been back and forth on which one I've actually been picking, but I think ultimately, if I'm making a pick, gun to my head, Texas wins this football game and covers. But just I've got that nagging feeling in the back of my mind is all. Don't be surprised, I guess, is what I'm saying, if Michigan finds a way to do more than they should here.
So your official pick, Texas or Michigan?
Official pick is Texas for sure.
Okay. Next game, what used to be a Southwest Conference game is now an SEC versus Big 12 matchup. We got Arkansas at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State currently 7.5 point favorite, over under 62.5. And I know both of these teams played against lesser competition in week 1, and objectively, Arkansas Pine Bluff is not near as good of a team as South Dakota State is. Just factually correct.
Yeah.
South Dakota
State. Yeah, sorry. I was just probably going to say exactly what you were going to say. South Dakota State, pretty constant playoff team in the FCS. Arkansas Pine Bluff is not that.
Correct. But at the same time, Arkansas put up 70 points and only allowed 130 total yards last week. The biggest thing I'm seeing from those week 1 matchups is that Arkansas allowed 7 rushing yards. And
so that wasn't a typo. That's the single digit number 7.
Correct. If you added every single rushing yard that Arkansas Pine Bluff got through a 60-minute game into one play, it's still not a first down. And that tells me a lot, because with Oklahoma State having a quarterback that, could take after his head coach and go off about being a man in a press conference, because he is in his 7th season as a college quarterback. But that at the same time, their offense relies almost entirely on the running game and Ollie Gordon. That gives me a very good feeling about Arkansas's ability to handle Oklahoma State's offense. I'm not saying they are going to limit it. I'm not saying they're going to hold them to less than 150 yards rushing, because Ollie Gordon honestly deserved to be in New York for the Heisman ceremony last year with the insanity he did.
Oh, yeah.
But contain is really what Arkansas needs to do in this game. Oklahoma State, on the other hand, gave up 388 yards last week to South Dakota State, 264 yards passing, 124 yards rushing. And with Arkansas having a true dual threat quarterback in Traylon Green, am I saying that correct? I feel like I'm combining multiple Arkansas players.
That sounds right to me. I don't know enough about their roster. Taylon Green. Okay.
I was saying Traylon Burks and Taylon Green at the same time. But with him being a true dual threat quarterback and an improved offensive line, with Sam Pittman taking the entire offensive line group back over, and an improved defense through the 2 deep, I do not see how Oklahoma State wins this game. It may be a 1-point overtime win, but I think Arkansas is just so much more dynamic on both sides of the ball this year. They can stop the run. They can stop the pass. They can both run and pass this year, which they've been unable to do over the past 2 seasons. I think Arkansas wins this outright. Covers, wins. I think Arkansas is 2-0 going into next week.
So looking at the trends again, you know me, trends guy. Arkansas is 5-14 under Sam Pittman against ranked opponents. One of those wins was Cincinnati, still in the American Conference after their college football playoff run after Desmond Ridder. One was a Texas team that went 5-7 that year. And one of those wins was against the 2020 Mississippi State team the week after they beat LSU week 1. So they were a little, they were put in the top 25 because they beat the defending national champion. We found out both of those teams
they were tired from 700 passing yards.
Right. So the trend based on that would indicate, if you're just looking at the trend like I tend to do, that Oklahoma State should win this game. However, I'm with you. I think Arkansas wins this game outright as well. The Sam Pittman is 2-0 against the spread in these non-conference games against ranked opponents. Again, that's a small sample size, but you look at the rosters that both of these teams have, and Oklahoma State has a very good running game, and I want to give them the credit for that. They've built that up really well over there. They don't have the dudes on defense, in my opinion, to keep up with what looks to be a very, very good Arkansas rushing attack. Whereas I think Arkansas on defense, again, like you said, Arkansas Pine Bluff, so take it as what it is. But holding any team to 7 rushing yards is going to be impressive regardless. I think they've got the dudes. I mean, I hate to just repeat what you said, but they can contain Ollie Gordon enough to score more points than Oklahoma State, which is all they need to do. I think they can get it done. I hope they get it done because I love Sam Pittman and I want him to keep his job. And this is the kind of game that could save Sam Pittman's job if he wins it, especially if he can win it by double digits, which I honestly think is not that crazy to predict with just the difference between these two teams.
Yeah, like I think this game really has 2 outcomes, and it's Arkansas wins by 1 to 17 points, or Arkansas loses by 14 points or more. Like, I truly think the only way this game is close is with Arkansas winning.
Yeah. If Arkansas keeps it close, I think they have a tendency when they get close to find a way to come out on top in these kinds of games. Just ask LSU. They've done it with them the last 20 years.
Yeah, and if Alan Bowman had showed at any point in his career through any of his 3 colleges he's attended that he had the ability to win games, close games against quality opponents with his arm, I would probably pick Oklahoma State. But let's put it like this. When Oklahoma State relied on Alan Bowman to win a game last year, they lost to University of South Alabama.
Tells you everything you need to know.
Yep, that if they can hold Ollie Gordon to 120 yards or less, Arkansas wins this game.
Yeah, Oklahoma State has no other offense in this game if they can do that.
All right, speaking of a game that will probably be mostly offense, Tennessee at NC State. University of Tennessee, 8-point favorite, over under 60.5. Last week, NC State struggled in the first half against Western Carolina, and by struggled, I mean they were tied at halftime with Western Carolina, and they were actually trailing going into the fourth quarter before scoring 21 points in the fourth quarter. So, Grayson McCall had to dig real deep and find 2020 Grayson McCall. Pretty sure we saw a mullet sprout in between quarters for him to get back to his old self. But NC State gave up 361 yards to Western Carolina, 241 yards passing, 120 yards rushing. And without Kevin Concepcion going off in that game with 121 yards and 3 touchdowns, NC State loses that game decidedly. Like, it is not necessarily close.
Right.
Oh, I thought you were about to say something.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you.
Okay. Tennessee, on the other hand, won big against Chattanooga with 718 yards of total offense. And everyone heard me correctly. That was 718 yards of offense. And only allowing 227 yards on defense. As much as it hurts me to say, pains my soul, causes physical pain. Nico looked phenomenal against Chattanooga.
Oh, that hurts me just to hear, but it's true.
And it is just Chattanooga. I understand that. But the dude still went 22 of 28 for 314 yards and 3 touchdowns in just over a half of football.
Yeah. Now we'll see how good Chattanooga is this weekend. They're going to play an opponent this weekend that Tennessee is very familiar with, the old Georgia State Panthers. Sorry.
I guess
you just said something positive about them. I had to take a shot.
I guess that'll also tell us just how much of a contender Georgia Tech is potentially this year.
True.
But Tennessee has started to rotate guys in on defense now. They have some depth there, and 30 different players recorded a defensive stat last week against Chattanooga. And, unless Grayson McCall pulls out some mullet of that 2020 magic, I just don't see NC State being able to pull off this upset. So I'm taking Tennessee not only to win, but I got this line at 7.5 and actually put money on it on Tuesday.
That's a good call. Before it went up to 8.5.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good grab. While you were talking, I decided to do some research because I remembered in 2007 I went to a game between Georgia and Western Carolina, but couldn't remember how they fared. And halfway through the second quarter, Western Carolina actually had it within a score. But then, it ended up being 45-16. So it was not quite NC State's situation. I'll actually be in Charlotte during this game. Not going to the game, though. I just happened to be in town for something else. So I'll get all the traffic and none of the benefits of watching this football game.
Well, to be fair, it may be expensive, but it will definitely be the cheapest game in Bank of America Stadium. Probably, or the most expensive game in Bank of America Stadium.
Most expensive. Absolutely, it will. With Bryce Young doing what he's doing there. But yeah, so I've heard a lot of folks talking about this game, talking about the quarterbacks, talking about Nico. I'm not even going to try to say his last name. Versus Iamaleava. Okay, I will try. He's earned the respect enough for me to try. So I guess Iamaleava.
Shout out Connor O'Gara of Saturday Down South for teaching me most of my pronunciations. Just gonna be honest there.
Nice, good job, Connor. You are better at pronouncing things than Gary Danielson ever was. But so I get the tendency to make this about the quarterbacks. You've got Nico's insanely talented. Grayson McCall is very, very experienced. So I see looking at that battle. To me, it's the trenches that's going to decide this game. And I know that's kind of the football cliche, that everybody sort of talks about when they want to sound like they know football really well. But, some things are cliche because they're true. And in this case, I expect the game to look a lot like the Georgia Clemson game did, where, they sort of battle it out at first. But I think eventually the talent that Tennessee has is just going to kind of overwhelm and wear down that NC State defense and really that offensive line as well. Tennessee's got some studs on defense and some depth on defense, and I think that's gonna be the difference. So yeah, I agree with you. I think they win. I think they cover, and I think they cover pretty comfortably. To be honest with you, I would not be shocked to see this game get away from NC State. Not that I think, I'm not just basing this on the poor performance against West Carolina, but because that happens. But you just look at the talent difference, and yeah, it hurts me to say this. Tennessee's just got a huge, huge talent advantage over NC State this year.
Yeah, I mean, as much as pretty much every Georgia fan hates Tennessee at this point, you have to give Josh Heupel the respect for what he's done to that program since he took it over.
Yeah. There is still a gap between Tennessee and Georgia, but
yes,
that gap used to look like 41-0 blowouts in Knoxville because Tennessee just didn't have dudes and went 5-7, and they are certainly not that this season.
No, but at the same time, is their offense still slightly gimmicky? And if you have athletes in the secondary that can run with their receivers, do they score 20 points? Probably not. But are they good enough to beat 10 to 11 teams on their schedule? Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Like, would it shock me whatsoever if Tennessee made the playoff this year? No.
No.
Simultaneously, would it shock me if they went 8-4? No.
Yeah, that's kind of how these gimmicky offenses go. If somebody can keep rhythm with you, you're in for a long day. But if 90% of teams aren't going to work that way.
Speaking of offenses not working,
nice segue.
This because Chris Phillips, who we talked to yesterday, hopefully you guys listened to that episode, is a South Carolina fan, and he's been extremely gracious to us with his time over the years, and he's hooked us up with quite a few guests that he's gotten good relationships with. It hurts me to talk poorly about South Carolina at this point because of how much he has helped. But Kentucky versus South Carolina. Kentucky are currently 10-point favorites, over under 42.5. And, you know, Chris talked about it yesterday. South Carolina is going to struggle on offense. That is just kind of how they are built, mostly due to wide receiver and offensive line. I would think of this as both sidelines are a lesser talented version of what we saw last weekend with the Georgia game. When it comes to Kentucky, I think Brock is the right guy for that Kentucky system. And I personally believe that Kentucky has a top tier defense in college football. Is their schedule going to allow them to show that this year? Possibly not. They have a very tough schedule, and before that first game, I think I picked them to go 6-6 this year. After watching that first game, and after seeing how comfortable Brock looks in that offense, and seeing just how good their defense is, do I entirely think they could go 9-3? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But my one concern is that in this game, shockingly, something that South Carolina has not had in what seems like 15 years is a pass rush. And Dylan Stewart, the freshman, he played in that first game like a skinny Jadeveon Clowney. And that needs to be as scary for all of us as it sounds.
Oh, yeah. Dude is a stud with every letter capitalized.
He's like a 6'4", 220-pound track star.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that he is stronger than the tackles he's going against. He is so fast that even if you find a way to get a hand on him, he is running through that block.
Yeah. And speed is huge in college football right now. That's essentially how Georgia wore down really look at it, is they were so much faster at every position. So, even if he's not that strong, quote unquote, which I mean, he's probably a freak compared to me. if dude is outrunning everybody out there on that line, he's going to make some havoc in the backfield. He just is.
Yeah. No, as much as Dylan Stewart, almost as an individual, and you got Debo Williams and a few other guys on that defense, especially the safeties. They have phenomenal safeties. Both guys, freshmen, all SEC at one point in time. But I named 4 dudes out of 11. So, as much as that defense concerns me for Kentucky, I've got Kentucky covering this game. As much as it's a rivalry between these two schools dating back, a decade now, in as much as Shane Beamer needs to win this game, I just don't think they have the horses on offense to keep them in it. And that's even with Rocket Sanders and, video game cheat code Nick Harbor, who can't seem to get production on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Looking back at Kentucky again, looking at Brock Vandagriff, if any listeners don't know, we talk about him so casually because we know him so well at Georgia. But I thought he looked pretty good. He didn't just look like a first-time starter to me, even though he technically was. He has had plenty of experience against much tougher defenses than he's going to face most of this year, just from going to practice. So he looked good. I thought the one concern, like you mentioned the pass rush, you mentioned the dudes South Carolina has in the pass rush. And one thing I noticed was that Brock had a tendency, I guess he's more comfortable, he had a tendency to get out of the pocket and make his throws on the run. There was a one touchdown, I think, towards the end before they called it off, where there was nobody even coming anywhere near him, but he ran out and made a throw on the run in the flat. It was a great throw, and he was very comfortable doing it. So I don't begrudge him that if that's how he's comfortable. But, that does worry me a little bit if he's relying kind of on his speed to get away if, one of those pass rushers gets to the outside and tries to get to him. So I think South Carolina will make some plays on defense that look very, very impressive. But ultimately, I don't think they do anywhere near enough because, as you mentioned, it's only a couple of guys out of the 11 who will be out there. And I think as long as Brock gets enough time to throw, which I think he will most of the time, he'll be able to find who he needs to. So I like Kentucky to win. I like Kentucky to cover, not necessarily by much, although it could be by a lot. But I think a 2-score game is probably what I'm looking at here, something like a 13 points.
We're agreeing on a lot here.
I know that's another reason I went back and forth on the Michigan thing, because I was like, we need to disagree somewhere. I wasn't just doing it for the content. I meant everything I said, but I'm like, I can't not pick Texas in that game.
Yeah, going back into the offseason, that's a game we talked about multiple times, and up until last week, I thought Michigan had a chance to win that game. And then watching their play against Fresno State, I was like, unless they score like 3 defensive touchdowns, this is Texas 8 days a week.
Yeah. Now the good news, if you're Michigan, is you have not fallen from grace quite as hard as Cassie. But that's also because you actually went undefeated last year and won a national championship and didn't make a bunch of fake merchandise saying you did when you didn't, and kept that loser's mentality all off season.
And then when no one bought that unconquered merchandise, it was on sale for 60% off in the Jacksonville airport.
Yeah.
Still, one of my favorite things I saw this offseason is when we flew out of Jacksonville in like February. So like not even that long after the season. It was unconquered 13-0, and it was just in a rack in this. And the airport's only like 20 gates.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a giant rack in the one store in the airport. 60% off all Florida State 13-0 merchandise. And I was just...
Man.
And then right next to it was full price Georgia Orange Bowl champion merchandise.
Yeah, I imagine when those two things are next to each other, you have a hard time picking up the Florida State merchandise. But yeah, that's again just more of them getting exactly what they deserve. Good. And I hope they go 1-11 this season. I can't root for them against the Gators, but hope they get all of the success they deserve.
At this point, that Florida and Florida State game looks extremely entertaining in the way that a like 4th grade football game looks entertaining.
Yeah, like an Iowa versus Nebraska game would be entertaining.
Yeah, like if it comes to that point and I can find an over on turnovers by both teams, probably taking it.
Where is the over? The total needs to exist for DJ Uiagalelei throwing a ball 20 yards past a wide open receiver.
If I had a sports book, I guarantee you there would be an over on it every week.
Oh yeah.
And it would be so high that the under would hit most of the time, because at this point in his career, you just, it's like loading a truck in the military, or eating tortilla chips at a Mexican restaurant. How many? One more. The answer is just always one more.
Mm-hmm. One more. Yeah.
All right, guys. The last game we're talking about this week.
Imagine going and getting that guy in the portal. All right.
Imagine saying, I have Cam Ward and DJU, but I think DJU's that guy. Yeah, that's...
Oh, hang on. It says my internet connection is on.
Oh, I thought you were breaking up a little. Oh, I think you're back now.
Yeah, it looks like it. All right, great. For some reason it put me on the free local Wi-Fi on one bar instead of my house Wi-Fi for a minute there.
Hey, last week we were in the middle of the episode and my power just completely went out. So
stuff happens.
All right, last game we are talking about this week, and it is Tennessee Tech at Georgia.
Save the most competitive game for last, I see.
Yes. And if by competitive you mean like the first kickoff of the game.
Yeah.
So we had to do some digging to find this line. And I'll be honest, I could not find it on the sportsbook. I could not find it on ESPN. It was by an Instagram page that I'm assuming is run somewhere not in the state of Georgia.
So I saw it on Instagram, and then I went to verify it, and I actually did find these numbers on FanDuel, so they are verified at least there.
Okay. So according to FanDuel and an Instagram page that I cannot remember, Georgia is a 53.5 point favorite with the over-under set at 62.5.
That's the highest spread in history, I believe, for a Georgia game.
Yep. There were a couple at 49-ish last year. But yeah, no, that's just insulting to Tennessee Tech, for being honest.
Yeah.
If it's going to be that bad, just no one needs to release a line.
Yeah, I agree. Nobody's betting on a 53.5 point spread, regardless.
I don't bet on Georgia, but you could give me Georgia versus Islands High School down the road from me, and I still don't know if I would take 53.5.
Yeah. I don't know that I would take 30.
Yeah, that's just... So, as we normally do for these types of games, we're going to say what we would like to see versus, comparing Tennessee Tech's defensive line versus Georgia's offensive line for two reasons. One, I recently found out that I have friends whose family members play on this Tennessee Tech team. So I don't want to insult those people.
Fair.
But also, is anyone expecting Georgia to struggle against Tennessee Tech? Because I don't think so.
Last time I checked, Georgia's coach is not named Dan Mullen.
Or Billy Napier. So
yeah.
So what I want to see in this game, and this first one is an if, because it's still questionable on if this person is going to play. But if Trevor Etienne plays, I want to see what the backfield pass game is going to look like. I don't want to see necessarily some special stuff. I just kind of want to see how well he is going to do. I want to see Oscar Delp run more routes and catch some passes. Last week, I know we talked about it on the show on Sunday or whatever day we recorded. I honestly don't remember. But Oscar Delp ran 5 or less routes all day against Clemson with 0 catches. I want to see him run routes and catch passes, mainly because at this point I am not convinced he is healthy. And I want to see with my own eyes him run down the field with a football in his hands to convince me that he is healthy. And I hope he is. Like, I don't want that to come off negative towards him, but I think there's something that's being hidden around the lesser opponents that Georgia's playing through the first 2 weeks, and Clemson not necessarily a lesser opponent, but still hidden. I want to see more Colby Young. I know I've been hyping him up for the last few weeks. I think he is this year's Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. He is one of 2 receivers to catch passes last week, or touchdown passes last week. And, going back to the Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint touchdown in the Ole Miss game, once you get close to the end zone, just put something close to the crossbar or the field goal post and let him come down with it. That's what I want to see from him. I want to see if the D-line can get some pass rush without having to bring extra guys. To be fair, that is never a focus of Kirby Smart defense, but I would still like to see if they're capable of doing that. Whether intentional or not, if Tennessee Tech ever gets in an obvious passing situation, I want to see those guys bring the pressure, make those guys feel their athleticism and their size. And then the last thing I want to see, mainly this is a personal thing, I want to see who the next man up is at cornerback. I want to see if someone goes down or one of the guys is having a bad game, who is that next guy up? Because last year that was Julian Humphreys, and he's already locking down half of the field. I
Mhm.
really need to see who that next man up is because, as I have talked about over the last 2 seasons, I am not 100% sold on Dalen Everett. So I want to see, is that next guy better than him?
Yeah, so I will. I'm going to defend Dalen Everett a little bit. Obviously, not. I'm not going to defend last season Dalen Everett, although he did get picked on a lot because nobody was throwing the ball Kamari Lassiter's way at all last
Fair.
season. I thought against Clemson and the throws that he did, quote unquote, give up. From what I saw, most of the time he was right there in position, and Cade Klubnik just made a phenomenal throw and got it right in the
And
breadbasket. So he's improved quite a bit.
and those catches he did give up were against like a 6'6" tight end most of the time.
Yeah.
I
So
understand that. I do.
yeah,
I'm just
yeah. I
y'all
understand
know
not being
me. I
sold on
have
him yet, though.
I still have PTSD. Like I'm, going back all the way to Mark Richt days. You have to slap me in the face with proof for me to get you to believe it.
Yeah. So one thing I'm excited to see, and I just deleted all of my notes as you'll saw because I just had some other thoughts that I thought were better that I'm gonna do on the fly. I want to see some more of like the old. And when I call them Brock and Lad plays, I'm not insinuating that somebody is replacing Brock and somebody is replacing Lad. But we used to run these plays with Brock and Lad. The game winner against Auburn comes to mind, where you send both of those guys out there to cover one zone and make them pick who they're going to cover. We saw a couple of those against Clemson last week. One in particular is a beautiful play towards the beginning of the third quarter. It was a throw to Arian Smith, I believe, that got 20, 30 yards. And they were sending Dylan Bell and London Humphreys kind of in the same direction. I want to see a little more of that because it makes me feel good and makes me feel like Mike Bobo knows how to use these players that he's got instead of the players he wishes he had because they were a little bit different from what we used to run, but the same kind of scheming tools. I want to see a little more from the guys that we were expecting a little more from last week. Sort of like you mentioned, Oscar Delp is one of those guys. Benjamin Urasic kind of had a rough day in terms of running routes, catching passes. I'd like to see him get a little more comfortable, and I'm sure he'll get plenty of play in this game as well. I'm excited to see plenty of time with the twos because Kirby Smart, and the second he sees what he wants to see out of the ones, they're gone, and the twos are coming in there and probably running the entire second half. So I'm excited to see what we've got with some of those guys like Ellis Robinson, Samuel Mpemba, some of these young guys that haven't gotten a ton of play and that we haven't really gotten to see that talent on
Gunnar
display
Stockton is a
yet.
guy we haven't seen a ton of.
That's true. That's true. I completely left him behind because he had such a great game against Florida State last year that he's just one of the guys now. But you're right. I'm very excited to see him sling it a little bit. And then in terms of the end of the game, I'm excited to hear all of the Ole Miss and Alabama and Tennessee fans talk about how we didn't score as much against these guys as they did against their cupcakes. Because they're not going to. Kirby, the game we met at that Samford game a couple years ago was 30-0 against a team that we probably could have put 70 on if we really wanted to.
And in
but
that
that's
game,
just not how
Georgia
we
didn't throw a pass in the second half.
exactly. And I see a pretty similar game happening here. I know the Tennessee Tech folks made some comments about not necessarily liking playing these games, and Kirby, if he's gonna read that as anything, he's gonna read it as soft. So he might just go in there and drill him. I don't know, but I'm expecting he won't do that. And the reason he won't do that is because he doesn't have to use these games to prove anything to anybody in the media. Our other SEC counterparts ran up 70 points and left their starters in all day because they felt like they had something to prove. And yeah, Alabama fan, I'm talking to you too. Kalen DeBoer felt like he had something to prove, and that's why he ran up the score. It doesn't actually prove anything. That's up for debate. But that's why they were doing it. And Kirby Smart is the best coach in college football, coaching the best team in college football. He doesn't have to prove anything to anybody. But it will be very, very funny hearing these opposing SEC fans try to act like the score in these games really matters.
Yeah. No, I agree with that sentiment of does the score in these nobody games really matter? No, because how many teams in the SEC would beat Clemson 34-3?
Yeah, exactly. We've proven everything we need to. Cincinnati at the beginning of last season beat Eastern Kentucky, put up 66 points, and they went 3-9.
Yep.
So I'm not saying that Tennessee and Alabama and Ole Miss won't be very good this year. Obviously, they will be. I'm just saying those scores don't mean what they're all saying they mean. And the score of this game, when it's 41-0, 48-0, it will be a shutout, by the way. But it's not going to mean anything.
And speaking of Eastern Kentucky, and we gotta hurry this up just a little bit because my laptop is about dead and I don't have the charger in here. But have you heard what Eastern Kentucky did to Western Kentucky for their game this weekend?
No, I did not. What? Let me.
So, cross-state rivals, and Kentucky is a very wide state,
Yeah.
So Western Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky have a game this weekend. Western Kentucky has put it out since their spring game that they want to do a whiteout this weekend against Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky has forced Western Kentucky to not be able to wear their white uniforms because it is a home game for Western Kentucky.
I love it.
Just so petty that they said, "Oh, I mean, I guess if you guys want to wear white that bad, we just won't play this weekend,"
Man, so they're just gonna run out there looking like those folks in Gainesville did last week, wearing their home colors to a whiteout.
Yep.
That is phenomenal.
And it was completely forced by Eastern Kentucky, who, to my knowledge, is like a D2 school, not even FCS.
They may be. I don't actually know.
For someone that used to live like 2 hours from there, I really should know, but I don't.
Yeah. Well, if they are FCS, I know they are not anywhere near the creme de la creme of that division. But I love rivalry games so much for this reason. I love college football, man. I'm so glad it's back.
Yes. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nothing Finer podcast. As always, you can find us on social media at nothing.finer.pod on Instagram, at finerpod on Twitter. Just look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Nothing Finer Pod on Nothing Finer Podcast on TikTok. Caleb's page is Dog Sports Memes on
Dog
Instagram.
spelled the way it should be, DAWG.
Yes. One of the best follows on Instagram by far. If you are going to be in Savannah for any Georgia game this year, go check out Barrel House. If it is the Kentucky, Alabama, Texas, or Ole Miss games, your boy's going to be there. So come hang out with me. We'll have stuff to sell. We're talking about doing some insane giveaways with Barrel House and Rock 1061, which I'm also going to be on Rock 1061 around 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Just if you guys want to hear me more talking about football, go to their website and check that out around 4 p.m. tomorrow. But as always, guys, remember there's nothing finer in the land
than a drunk, obnoxious Georgia fan.